Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. A drone strike in Russia's Kursk region killed one person and wounded 9 more. According to the region's authorities, the UAV hit a residential building, causing a fire, which spread over several floors. So far, it is not certain whether the drone came from Ukraine, as officials in Kiev are yet to comment on the attack. A total of 9 people reportedly suffered shrapnel wounds, head injuries and burns. Russian emergency services are at the site. This marks another night of strikes since Kiev and Washington agreed on a temporary truce agreement. Russia regularly pummels Ukrainian cities with drone attacks, outnumbering Ukrainian drone strikes on Russian soil. Overall, since the 11th of March, when the temporary truce was agreed upon, Russia has launched over 70 missiles, 2,000 drones and 6,000 guided aerial bombs at Ukraine. In an interview for Fox News, Donald Trump's envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, commented on his recent trip to Moscow. According to Witkoff, during his meeting with Vladimir Putin, the Russian leader presented his conditions for a ceasefire deal. Witkoff also added that a deal with the Russian Federation seems to be on the horizon. Witkoff did not say what Putin demanded in exchange for a ceasefire in Ukraine, but admitted that the agreement revolves largely around the 5 regions of Ukraine occupied by Russia. Moreover, during the interview, Witkoff went on to say that NATO and Article 5 of the treaty are a concern for authorities in Moscow. On Friday, Witkoff was hosted by Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin, where the 2 officials spoke for more than 4.5 hours. Following the meeting, Witkoff expressed his belief that relations between the United States and Russia are salvageable. According to Witkoff, trade and investment opportunities between the 2 superpowers would be a stabilizing factor in Eastern Europe. Asked about further sanctions against Russia following the recent attacks against Ukraine, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski said recent strikes indicate that Russia has no remorse over killing Ukrainian civilians. He also added that Viktor Orbán's upcoming visit to Moscow indicates the Hungarian Prime Minister's, and I quote, lack of moral clarity.
Definitely, yes. Multiple ministers pointed this out in their statements. But we have one country, Hungary, which doesn't have this moral clarity we have about Putin's attacks. He's talking about peace while bombing civilians and killing children. The victim agrees to a ceasefire, and he either escalates its conditions or escalates attacks. This gives us moral clarity, but apparently not every country is guided by the same values.
Brussels is considering legal measures that would allow European companies to break long-term gas contracts with Russia without incurring heavy penalties. The European Commission is looking into using force majeure clauses, which could help companies exit agreements without paying compensation to Moscow. This move is part of the EU's broader effort to reduce its dependence on Russian energy and cut off financial support for the Kremlin amid the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Despite a significant reduction in Russian pipeline gas supplies to the EU, Russian liquefied natural gas exports have increased. The European Union is working on a plan to eliminate Russian fossil fuels by the year 2027. Though challenges remain, particularly with Hungary and Slovakia, which still rely heavily on Russian energy. Additionally, the EU is exploring tariffs on Russian gas as an alternative to a full import ban, which would require the approval of a majority of member states. Several hundred students protested last night outside the Serbian state broadcaster's offices, blocking the entrance to the building. The demonstrators blamed the public TV station for coverage that favors the narrative pushed by sitting President Aleksandar Vučić. The protesting students will remain on the streets until elections are held for the Serbian National Broadcasting Council or until the Serbian state broadcaster is shut down. Similar protests broke out in Novi Sad, where a group of protesters blocked the entrance to the local offices of the Serbian public television. This marks protests in a wave of unrest. that's been sweeping across Serbia since last November, when a railway station canopy crashed down, killing 16 people. The demonstrators believe that the structure collapsed due to poor renovation work brought on by government corruption. A group of Serbian students is cycling to the European Parliament in Strasbourg to protest against abuses of power by the government. They believe that the pervasive corruption in Serbia contributed to the Novi Sad tragedy, which claimed 16 lives last November when the train station roof suddenly collapsed. Our reporter Paweł Trzaskowski joined the protesting students in Germany.
The penultimate stage of Tour of Strasbourg, as it's known in Serbia, has just concluded with about 80 cyclists entering Karlsruhe in Germany. And this means that the Serb protesters have already covered more than 1,300 kilometers. They started in Novi Sad, Serbia's second largest city, and also the city where the tragic incident happened in November last year. A concrete canopy of a railway station collapsed, tragically killing 16 people. And this incident sparked mass protests across the country, with people taking to the streets opposing what they believe is a corrupt and captured state by the country's government and its president Alexander Vučić. In fact, the protest turned out to be the biggest challenge for Alexander Vučić, the country's president, since he took power, and this Tour of Strasbourg is another installment of these protests. That was the penultimate stage. Tomorrow is the final stage, where cyclists are hoping to reach Strasbourg in France. From Karlsruhe, Germany, for TVP World, I'm Paweł Trzaskowski.
Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama has said that his country aims to become a part of the European Union by the year 2030. At the same time, Rama admitted that gives Albania very little time to implement the needed reforms.
Our dream is to be part of this union on 2030, and that's why the plan is to conclude the whole negotiations on 2027, which is a very tight time, and that's why we need every day to be a restless day of work, and that's why we need to have more work on our table. We have learned in the hard way with the EU, never ask a date, but always be ready for the date, because we are here to date, EU.
European Council President Antonio Costa has stated that the enlargement to the Western Balkans is a political priority for the European Union. On Monday, EU's top official praised Albania's progress in meeting accession demands and announced his plans to visit all 6 Western Balkan countries next month. Our European correspondent Alex Kadir has more.
Well, a clear signal, a clear statement of intent from EU officials here in Brussels, meeting with Edi Rama, the Albanian Prime Minister, but speaking about accession of the Western Balkans to the European Union more broadly. We heard from Antonio Costa, the European Council President, saying it was a strategic imperative for these countries to join, of course, as soon as feasible, because joining the European Union for these countries will involve a lot of reform, a lot of work on their rule of law, on their economies, on their judiciary, and so much more. Nevertheless, we heard from Radosław Sikorski, who was chairing the meeting, of course, the Foreign Minister of Poland. This is what he had to say about the importance of these new countries joining.
In the current overall challenging geopolitical situation, enlargement remains, of course, at the front of EU's policy agenda. The Polish presidency supports a merit-based enlargement of the EU, and now more than ever, welcoming new members is a geostrategic investment in peace, security, stability and prosperity.
The Polish Foreign Minister also went on to say that it will require effort. Edi Rama, the Albanian Prime Minister, wants his country to end the negotiations to join the EU by 2027, allowing his country to become a member by 2030. An ambitious target, he recognized, that would take a lot of work. Radosław Sikorski was clear that work, based on Poland's experience, is worth it. Another interesting point from further afield from Luxembourg today, Kaja Kallas, the EU's top diplomat, asked if any candidate countries were to attend the May 9th celebrations in Moscow, how would that be received in Brussels? Let's have a listen.
Any participation in the 9th of May parades or celebrations in Moscow will be not taken lightly on the European side, considering that Russia is really waging a full-scale war in Europe.
Kaja Kallas there expressing the fact that this is about reform but also about European values and that member countries should think twice before they head to Moscow in May. Alex Cadye, TVP World, Brussels.
The first day of the European Space Agency conference has just concluded in Warsaw. The discussions focused on outlooks for building a resilient space industry on the continent. Zuzanna Jurek reports.
There is no space without defense and no defense without space, said Michał Baranowski, the Undersecretary of State at the Polish Ministry for Economic Development and Technology. These words came during the starting day of a two-day conference of the European Space Agency taking place here in Warsaw. Now, some of the other key notes of discussion were the words of Pascal Legai, the Senior Security Advisor at the ESA, who touched upon some of the approaches which might be necessary for the build of a pan-European defense and space infrastructure.
We develop a new capacity, a new system. It's to include at the beginning of this new activity, of this new program, the civilian needs, but also to include the defense needs to have a more synergetic approach for a new capacity.
But apart from identifying the approaches which will be necessary for the next couple of years, today's conference also identified some of the limitations which are currently present for the European space deployment. These included the fragmentation of efforts across member states, which currently focus primarily on domestic efforts as opposed to pan-European efforts. Additionally, financing proved to be one of the key challenges, as currently only 0.07% of total GDP of the bloc is spent on space efforts. Now we got some insight into the initiatives which are being taken to address some of these challenges and some of the initiatives which will be developed over the next coming years in order to help build a robust and resilient space infrastructure in Europe.
This ERS, European Resilience from Space program, to be in a position to react. So it's a national decision to invest or not. Basically, this ERS proposal, it's a constellation of to be reactive when there is a crisis management situation.
But most importantly, today focused on the cross-section of the well-identified cross-section between space and defense. Now, the key takeaway, which we've heard over and over again, is that it will take a village, meaning collaboration and collective efforts will be necessary for building a truly robust and workable defense industry for the years to come. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
Romania's Environment Minister has suggested a legal change that would enable the culling of bears wandering into villages in search for food. With around 13,000 bears, Romania holds the largest population of the species in Europe. Official statistics reveal that over the last 20 years, bears have killed 25 people and injured more than 270.
The proposal I'm about to make is to change local laws to facilitate stronger intervention on bear presence, because today a mayor, before taking a decision that could really protect the locals in his jurisdiction, is obliged first to chase away the bear, then try relocating it, and only then decide to put down the animal. With this new law, local authorities such as mayors could take the decision they believe to be the most correct one, and after we can talk about gradually decreasing the bear presence. I'm afraid because I have a garage behind the block and sometimes the bears come up so close I can practically shake hands with them. When night comes, we're afraid to get out of the house.
And with this, we conclude our news bulletin. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.